All right, we are live. But it's when I look over here like I'm looking way somewhere else. Anyway, hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome. Hold on, some music playing. Hello everyone, how you doing? This is Willard Maxwell, the president of the Newport News NAACP branch. Thank you all so much for allowing me to be your president. I do not take this opportunity lightly, and I do appreciate you all voting for me and putting me in here for a second term. I'm going to just open up with a welcome and give you a greeting. Just let you know I'm gonna be reading the agenda, y'all. Thank you all so much for being here. We love you so much, and we want to make sure that we help navigate you through this pandemic. This forum has been put together by our educational committee of the Newport News NAACP. We want to make sure that we give you updates on what's going on with our school system and anything that's going on with our city. So we want to thank our panelists. I'm not going to introduce everyone because Dr. Best would do that. I want to thank our panelists for being here and for taking time out of their schedule. What I need you all to understand is, if you're on Facebook, inbox us if you have any questions. If you're on the Zoom, you can type in the chat. Right now, if you're on Facebook and you want to join us on Zoom, if you can just go to www.naacpforum.com, www.naacpforum.com, and that will take you directly to this Zoom meeting, and you'll be able to you'll be able to ask questions if you haven't already emailed me in advance. Well, without further ado, I want to introduce our moderator. Our moderator is Dr. Terry Best. She's one of our school board members. She helps guide our school, and she helps to give ideas to our great superintendent, Dr. Parker, and we just want to thank her so much for everything she does and for organizing this along with Brother Bullock to make sure that we get this information to our parents. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Dr. Best. I'm out your way.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I will get right to it. So, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, so many things that have happened that have impacted students, and many of them in a negative way. As a result of this, the government has appropriated lots of money so that we can meet the needs of our students. And you have heard words thrown around such as ESSER, American Rescue Plan, Education Fund Stabilization, Relief Supplemental Appropriation Act. And I know many of you are wondering, exactly what does that mean for my community? What does that mean for my child's school? And in particular, what does that mean for my child? So I am honored to have two people here today that will share some information with us, and all of us will be in a situation where we have more knowledge and are able to better understand the impact that this additional funding will have on our community. It is my pleasure to introduce my representative and many of yours, our third congressional representative, Congressman Robert Scott, and he is also the chair of the Education and Labor Committee. Congressman Scott will speak with us first, and he will be followed by our very own superintendent of Newport News Public Schools, Dr. George Parker. And Dr. Parker will follow Congressman Scott with opening remarks. And as Reverend Maxwell has stated, after that, we will begin to take questions from you. When you walk away from this, and if anyone asks you, where is the money and what are you doing with the money, you should be able to share some information with you. Some great things are coming our way that we feel will really be beneficial for our students. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, Congressman Scott, and we'll begin with you with opening remarks.
Thank you and good evening. Thank you, Dr. Best. Dr. Maxwell, Mr. Bullock, it's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for organizing this forum. Thank the NAACP for your continued advocacy on behalf of students and families. I'm pleased to be here with Dr. Parker as we discuss the American Rescue Plan and the plan for our students with the funding that came from that legislation. I also want to recognize the parents, students, educators, and community members for tuning in tonight to learn how the American Rescue Plan is helping to reopen schools safely, let them stay open safely, and get students back on track. As everyone experienced last year, the sudden shutdown of schools combined with the inequitable access to remote learning technology prolonged the traditional summer slide for more than a year. That summer slide is a situation where low-income students actually regress during the summer, and they not only regress during the summer, but for a full year did not have in-person education. That situation has been studied, and one thing that the studies have found is the achievement gaps that already existed have been made worse by the pandemic. School closures were not only bad for academics, it also reduced students' access to proper nutrition with the school meals. It deprives students of social and emotional learning. That's the learning that happens when you're dealing with people. You don't get that kind of learning when you're sitting at home in front of a computer. Also made it harder for school officials to identify cases of child abuse and neglect. All of that points to the fact that we've got to open the schools safely. And by the way, we're not going to open the economy until we open the schools. So as the Newport News Public Schools prepare to reopen in just a few weeks, it's going to take everyone from Dr. Parker, Dr. Pett, Dr. Best, our educators, parents, and students to help our students stay open safely and make up for lost time. And thanks for the new federal funds, we have the resources to do it. The American Rescue Plan, which Congress passed in March of this year, delivered an historic $130 billion investment to K through 12 schools across the nation. It's the biggest one-time federal investment in K through 12 education in our nation's history. And it was allocated according to the Title I formula, which is basically a measure of poverty. So the communities with the greatest need got the most money. To put $130 billion in perspective, we usually send out about $16 billion in Title I money. This, in the rescue plan, $130 billion. Newport News Public Schools will receive $82 billion through the rescue plan. And I know the funding is already making a difference in terms of planning for the school year. School leaders in Virginia and across the country have told me, as chair of the Education and Labor Committee, that the resources can help open schools safely, can protect students and staff, and support students' emotional and mental needs. Can also close achievement gaps by giving the schools the tools they need to help students reverse the extended summer slide. Some of the, at least 20% of the money has to be used specifically to address learning loss. This money can be spent by extending school days, offering comprehensive after schools and summer programs, hiring counselors, reducing class size in the challenging schools, assistant teachers. There's a lot that the money can be used for. And each school district will develop its own plan, and that's why tonight's session is so important, because it shows that the NAACP is on the case, insisting that the plan be targeted and to safely open the schools and to eliminate the achievement gaps. Now, I've talked to Dr. Parker and other superintendents in my district about their plans, and I'm confident that Dr. Parker and the school board will have some excellent news to share tonight. So again, I want to thank the NAACP for organizing the forum, and thank Dr. Parker and Dr. Best and Mr. Bullock for being with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now have open remarks by Dr. Parker.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to meet with you this evening on behalf of Newport News Public Schools. As you heard Congressman Scott mentioned, there is a sizable amount of funding that's Newport News received in accordance with the American Rescue Act. And we want to make sure that those funds are transformational for our school division. So some of the things I will share with you this evening are fundamentally functional and give us a greater operational capacity for such as for safety and technology use. But also some of these ideas are transformational in that there's a great deal of flexibility with the funding that we receive to address learning loss, but also to improve the quality of instruction in our school division. And I mentioned early on during the pandemic to my staff, once we were early on in COVID-19, I said, we'll face the challenges and we'll have to deal with those on a daily basis. But at some point, there will come an opportunity. And we're now in the opportunity window of this pandemic, where we have a sizable amount of funding that will last to September 30th of 2024. And we need to make great use of this funding to improve programs in our school divisions, to improve resources for students, the quality of instruction and the preparedness of our teachers, and also to address primary issues that we're facing right now, such as a teacher shortage in areas such as recruitment and so forth, and retention of our staff. So tonight I'll share quite a few areas where we are using the funding. Dr. Best, you want me to go ahead and continue and go ahead and move into some of the spending plan, or do you want to wait to questions? I can do either if you'd like me to do so at this time.
You can begin, Dr. Parker, if you would like, just maybe initially, and then cut it off, because we do want to be able to take some of the questions, and I'm sure some of the questions will be some of the things that you have in your presentation. So if you want to take a few more minutes and go ahead and expound, we'll give you that liberty.
Okay, so I'm providing some verbal information, but I want to start by saying our complete spending plan is on our school division webpage at nnschools.org. So if you visit nnschools.org, there is a plan for the ESSER spending plan, ESSER 3 spending plan, and there's also a survey where you can provide input after reviewing that spending plan, and we'll review that periodically as we continue to work out the details of our plan. Our date to submit, we have to submit the plan electronically to the federal government by September 1st. So what have we done to prepare for the development of that spending plan up to this point? We've had various meetings with many of our departments and stakeholders. We sent out a community survey which garnered over 2,000 responses to determine what are some of the high priority areas in terms of our funding needs based on that funding. And then we've put out online at this time some detail to that spending plan that outlines some of the key areas where those dollars will be targeted. Again, if I'm sitting here in 2021, it will be very difficult for me with 100% accuracy to say what our needs will be in 2023 or 2024. That spending plan goes out until September 30th of 2024. However, we want to make sure that we've captured what our community input, our staff input, and also engage the board. Our last board retreat, our last board work session was on the CARES Act spending plan. We want to continue to get input from our stakeholders as we work out some more detail in terms of CARES Act spending. Now, with that being said, it's CARES Act 3 is a package of roughly $82 million, $82.1 million. Up to 20% of that funding should be spent on learning loss or instructional programs, the instructional needs of students, whether it's, as Congressman Scott mentioned, whether it's extended learning, whether it's additional programs and resources, whether it's assessment products, or even professional development for staff to improve the quality of instruction in our classrooms. So I'll just run through a few things where we're spending money in that area. And then I'll move into the operational side where that funding is used to improve safety, mitigation strategies, and air quality in our schools. So in the area of learning, unfinished learning, we wanted to, one, provide opportunities for additional tutoring and resources. And we're now a one-to-one school division. So since the pandemic, we have managed to provide every student in our division a device, a Chromebook, and we're moving towards iPads in the earlier grades, pre-K, kindergarten, and eventually first grade. We've also incorporated a learning management system that allows the teachers to load their assignments, and kids who are working from home or even in school will use that learning management system to coordinate their assessments, track their grades, track projects, do their work, assigned work in that learning management system. And that's another pretty big accomplishment for a division of our size. It would normally take about 3 years to become a fully virtual school division. We did it in roughly 3 to 4 months. There were some growing pains last year, but we are there now, and now we're ready to maximize the opportunity. We started a virtual learning academy, which will be for grades 9 through 12 this year. That was planned during the pandemic. We knew that coming out of COVID-19, we still wanted to maximize the virtual capabilities of our school division. So we wanted to provide more flexible opportunities for students to take both courses online and courses in person, like colleges do, because that's a similar schedule to what they would have if they go to once they go to post-secondary education. So we now have a virtual learning academy that students can apply for. We've had, using CARES Act funding, we have hired staff to support that virtual learning academy. It will allow us to expand curriculum into elective areas, offer courses that we haven't offered before, and also offer courses that may not be Newport News courses. If a student wants to take Mandarin Chinese, or if they want to take Italian, we now have capabilities to offer additional electives, or if they're interested in some work-based learning opportunities. So, and want a flexible schedule so that they can work during one day of the week and go to school in person on other days. So the Virtual Learning Academy will be very big for us as students progress through that, because it'll allow students to free up their schedule to still meet their academic requirements while also being able to expand electives and do experience work-based learning opportunities. So we've also added support staff under this plan that will enable us not only for coaching teachers, but also for working in the classroom and supporting students. So we've been able to expand our support staff and provide additional professional development, targeted professional development. We brought in diagnostic tools. Now this is very important, because since we've had some kids who have been out of traditional school for over a year, it's going to be very important that we have diagnostic tools when they come back in the fall so teachers can assess them in real time and address their learning needs in Tier 1 instruction, which is in the classroom. So we've increased our access to diagnostic tools and instructional products that allow us to measure growth, diagnose student deficiencies, but also to measure growth in reading and math as the students progress.
Dr. Parker?
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Parker, I'm going to ask you to pause right there, because we do want to do a little back and forth, and we'll give you other opportunities to students.
Okay, because I keep going. It's a lot funny, so I can keep going for a while. So I'll stop there for questions, and I'll get into operations if as the questions
thank you.
Relate to that.
Thank you so very much. Congressman Scott, thank you for your response. My first question was to ask you to elaborate a little bit more about the CARES Act, but you did that very well in your opening remarks. So I'm going to go ahead to my next question is, will the American Rescue Plan Act be fully funded?
It's not only fully funded, it's passed and enacted. So the money has been appropriated, so it's on the way. No further action needs to be taken for the money to flow. Usually, often we pass what's called an authorization bill, which authorizes spending, but then you have to pass the appropriations bill to actually fund the authorization. In this case, the American Rescue Plan was a self-funding legislation, so the money has been appropriated. Nothing else has to be done.
It is so good. I'm so glad to hear that. And now everyone knows. So that's really good to know, because sometimes people are concerned. They'll say they're going to do this, and then 2 years Congress says we can't fund that. So that's really, really good to know. And one additional question, Congressman Scott, how will school systems be evaluated? Can you answer that for me?
One of the problems we had with the legislation is it went through a process called reconciliation, so we could only do the funding. We couldn't provide additional legislative language. So they are being evaluated as they have always been evaluated under in Virginia under the SOL system and under Every Student Succeeds Act to make sure that the students are progressing and they will be judged. And if they're not progressing, and if there are achievement gaps where schools are not accredited, there's a process that's already in place. So there's no new assessment because of the legislation. It's the same assessment that there's been before. And that's why the meetings like this are so important, because with the new money, we need to make sure that the process is working and that the plan is in place. We're blessed to have Dr. Parker with the plan being developed. He says it's submitted September 1st. I suspect that there are a lot of school systems that won't have plans that come up to standard. They will be assessed on the normal assessments. One of the things that we hope will happen is with this additional money that we will see achievement gaps dissolve. That we have, when you say achievement gap, everybody knows what you're talking about. Yes. That's just outrageous. But if we have this extra money and we're able to invest it accurately so that we deal with students who are a little behind and bring them up, so that we eliminate the achievement gaps, we can prove that with appropriate funding, we don't have to have achievement gaps. If, on the other hand, we end up the year with the same achievement gaps we had after all this money, we'll be criticized, and it'll be the last time we get any kind of money like this.
Thank you. Thank you for your frankness, Congressman Scott. Now, Dr. Parker, so that leads right into our next question. What data will be used to determine the programs and plans that will be a priority with these funds? And then I'm going to go ahead and give you part two of that question. And what will be done to close that achievement gap?
Okay, so I'm gonna go back to what I was just initially talking about, which was diagnostic assessments and looking at additional products that measure student growth. The first thing we need to understand is that in this new year, the Virginia Department of Education and the Virginia State Board has now approved growth assessments as a measure of the SOL's as accreditation metrics. So what that means, this is huge. What that means is we normally used to take a test in the spring, and that would be the score that the data you use to determine whether a school is accredited. And kids were able to retest and may improve their score. Now, since we're starting to also factor in growth, if a student tests in the spring of 2022, because that'll be our next test cycle, and well, they tested in 2021. Let's just take last spring. Those kids who tested last spring in May for us, when they take their test in 2022, in the spring of 2022, if they've shown a significant level of growth, then that data will also be able to, those points will be awarded to the school and count towards their accreditation. If the student takes the growth assessment in the fall, and this is a new assessment the state is offering, and they look at their fall score compared to spring, and they show measurable growth, then we also will get this credit towards accreditation points based on that student's progress over the course of a year in reading and in math and mathematics. So we're very excited to know that focusing on progress, as we know, some students will come to us with significant deficits after this pandemic. They cannot, some of them, while virtual learning was offered both synchronously, in person, and asynchronously, there will be students with significant deficits who may have been disengaged learners, or this just wasn't the format of learning for them, which is why this funding is important. So by providing that diagnostic assessments, measuring growth, and now getting credit for it, our teachers also will know that their students are progressing adequately. We want to see students get a year, in the elementary ranges, get a year's worth of growth in 1 year or more. But we know even when students have significant deficits, a year's worth of growth may not mean that they pass that SOL test. It just may mean that they, from the time that we've had them at the beginning of the year to the spring and to the end of the year when they test, that they've shown measurably over a year's worth of growth, which is still very important, because if they continue to do that, they will eventually catch up, progress, and do very well in school. So we're very happy that the state is also looking at growth in the calculation for school progress moving forward. Other assessments that we're looking at, tools that we're looking at, some are research-based products in mathematics and in literacy. And then we didn't wait till this year to start focusing on improving our curriculum. We had time during the pandemic to pull teacher groups together to work on curriculum, to improve our curriculum, to work on our curriculum in math and in English. We have a new literacy plan that we are rolling out in a literacy framework and providing the necessary professional development there. So I believe we're in position to see the measurable growth moving forward that we need to see, both in SOL testing, but as well in other metrics such as the growth measures that the state will be assessing us on moving forward. It will take some time. We were glad to have upwards of 90% of our students take their SOL tests in the spring. And if without that data, we would not be able to pursue the growth points in the spring of 2022. If we only had a few of those kids test, we would not be as well positioned as we feel we are moving into the fall. So we're very appreciative of the families that encourage their students to come out and test, because that baseline assessment will allow us to show progress moving forward.
So Dr. Parker, after all that assessment has been done, what would it look like to parents, as if I'm a parent looking into a school? What will it look like that's different as to what Newport News Public Schools is attempting to do to close that gap? I understand the diagnostic things, but then what next? What will I see? What will I hear? What will my child experience?
Well, we obviously have a strong student support team process. So if a student is not doing as well academically, that process brings the parent in and to engage with school staff to develop a specific plan for that student. And it's a non-special education process that allows us to make sure that all students' educational needs are being met. That is a process we implemented over 2 years ago in Newport News to ensure that we have less students slipping through the cracks, whether it's attendance, whether it's behavior, whether it's apathy, whatever it may be. We want to make sure we have a plan, individualized plan for that student. In terms of what parents will know in terms of progress at the elementary level, they'll get the data on the growth assessments, and they'll also understand the assessment data in terms of where their students are in terms of tiered supports that are available to students. So if a student's taking PALS and other reading assessments, whether they're using the Lexile score, which is just tells whether you're on grade level. Parents will also have access to that data platform. And now parents have access to information through Canvas as well and ParentView. So we have multiple tools to ensure that parents have up-to-date information as far as their child's progress. So we should see parents being able to engage, even in some cases, from their cell phone, to know where their students are as these assessments come through. We're building an assessment platform that will allow our internal staff to monitor student progress, but we're also finding ways through ParentView and other means to get assessment data to parents as well.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. And Congressman Scott, we are not ignoring you, but most of the questions that are coming in are for Dr. Parker. I think what the public is saying is thank you so much for the money and trusting us to be good stewards of this money. So we want you to stay here. And as soon as I get a question, I promise I will get back.
I'll stay here. And I'm interested in what Dr. Parker has to say. We're delighted that you've got a good plan led by the school board, the superintendent. But it's important that we aim it at eliminating the achievement gap. We have the funds to do it, and we don't need to tolerate that this year. Let me ask him a question while I'm being recognized. Dr. Parker, what adjustments will be made on buses to reduce the chance of infection?
Well, the primary adjustment is very simple, Congressman Scott. We're going to ask quite a few more parents if they're willing to drive their students to school. That's the simplest way first. The next way is as we did last year, will require mask wearing. With more students coming to school, we will allow 2 students to sit in in the same seat on the bus. So we won't be able to maximize distancing on school buses. But we do have a means now, an electronic means now, to track every student who's going on the bus. They'll have a card by later this year that they'll swipe when they come on the bus, and when they swipe when they come off the bus. And it'll improve our ability to contact trace if a student has a test positive or is symptomatic for COVID. Obviously, if everyone's wearing a mask and there's varying degrees of vaccination, it would mean that you wouldn't have to take all of those students. But if they're in assigned seats every day and we know that they were on the bus that day, it makes it so much easier to contact trace as we move forward, which is what we hope we'll do. On moderate days, we'll encourage bus drivers to crack the windows. Airflow has been proven to be an effective mitigation strategy. So when it's convenient to do so, bus windows will be cracked or open to allow airflow as the bus is moving. So that should be effective as well. But right now, Congressman Scott, I think all school divisions are facing serious bus driver shortages. And we know our bus drivers, bless their hearts, are going to have to operate multiple runs to make sure our school transportation systems work. And we just want to try to make it as safe for them as possible as we transport our students.
And speaking of ventilation, what are we doing in the classrooms in terms of ventilation?
So Newport News Public Schools, we made a significant investment last year with CARES ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 funding into air purification systems in classrooms for buildings that did not have an HVAC replacement within the past 5 years. We have 8 schools targeted under ESSER 3 funding for full HVAC replacements that will modernize and bring up those schools up to speed in terms of the amount of airflow and conditions in the buildings. We also will work on capital projects such as making sure windows are operational, because just again with the bus, just making sure some of our buildings are dated and just the windows won't open. So making sure we have operational windows, making sure we have good, fully operational ventilation systems in schools. That ESSER 3 funding will target air quality and allow us to continue the work. We've done a lot of work over the years with trying to maintain a schedule with HVAC systems, but it's always hard to keep up with those types of schedules when you have to also buy buses, paving, replace roofs, and those types of things. This ESSER 3 funding will allow us to really address air quality on a more strategic level in our school division.
All right, Dr. Parker, next question is, how will the funds impact accommodations for special education students and for extended school, for extended school and also for an extended school year?
So one of the things we're focused on in terms of tiered support for our students, we have 3 tiers. When I say tier 1, we're talking regular classroom instruction. Okay, 60 to 70% of your student needs can be met in tier 1 instruction with good quality instruction. So professional development for teachers, and this applies to special education as well. Quality instruction in the classroom, responsive teaching, good assessment practices, reteaching information. Tier 1 instruction meets the needs of most students. When you have students struggling, tier 2 is the next level of support. And those may be additional tutoring. It might be additional programs in the classroom, pull-out instruction. It might be support, teacher assistant support. It might be an additional study session in the school during the day. But it doesn't require a student to have an additional class or a separate pull-out schedule. Tier 3 is when you have actually a student in a reading class, or you have a student in an after-school program, or you have Saturday programs, whatever it may be that would allow you to do some structured, detailed work with the student in a separate instructional setting. So to have a robust system of supports for students is critical in order to meet the individual needs of your learners, because all students don't need tier 2 or tier 3 instruction. Some kids just need you to reteach it or to give you some feedback. And now in the area of special education, we have targeted some additional supports in terms of teacher assistants, and in terms of products, there's some reading intervention. System 44 is a very structured reading remedial program that we'll be using that our special needs students will also have access to. So we'll also be providing those additional supports. We have already used summer remedial funds to provide additional summer programs. Newport News was one of the only school divisions in the state during the first round of COVID where we actually had face-to-face instruction for our special needs students. We did have at least 20 students come in person for summer programming over during the summer when most of our kids were virtual learners that first summer. We continue to offer specialized courses for our special needs students, but where we're targeting some additional support because special ed has their own funding and they usually are based on the number of students and the needs of their students. Mm-hmm. But where we're targeting additional support for special needs students are where the kids are taking regular classes looking for a regular diploma, but they may have an IEP, and making sure that they have those tiered supports necessary to master the regular curriculum that they're needing when they're pursuing a regular diploma. Additional supports also in the classroom, product level supports that will provide real assessment and diagnostic tools like System 44, which will be available to teachers, and professional development for our special education teachers to make sure that they're providing quality instruction.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Parker. And Congressman Stott, we do have another question for you, and I think you answered it partly. The question was, how will schools be held accountable if they do not meet success? And I'm just going to add on to that a little bit. Are there any, you talked about how it might be difficult to get funding if this amount of money is not having an impact on the problem, but also is there some type of reporting system if it were to be discovered that school divisions were not being good stewards of this money?
As I indicated, we weren't able to get additional accountability language in there because we went through reconciliation, and under those rules, you could only do funding. Mm-hmm. But there is existing accountability on through Every Student Succeeds Act and the SOL matrix in Virginia. And so schools will be held accountable and will be accredited or not accredited based on coming up with present standards. The Secretary of Education will be using the bully pulpit to chastise schools or school systems for not having meaningful programs. But that's a little bit different from being able to withhold funding or some of the other real sanctions. The State Department of Education will be doing oversight. But basically, we have the normal accountability standards and the idea that everybody's looking. And as Dr. Parker just reminded, the future funding will be at risk if we fail to use this kind of money appropriately. I mean, this money is, Dr. Parker, what's the annual budget for the city school system?
Newport News, our annual budget is roughly around $320 million.
Okay, and you got an extra $80 billion spread over a couple of years.
The next few years, yes, sir.
Which you obviously, when you did your budget, you didn't count on because we didn't know we'd be able to pass this kind of legislation when you pass your budget. So it's money that can be used judiciously, and it's an opportunity. And for school board members, I would hope that the voters would notice whether the school board insisted on accountability, because hopefully there'll be political ramifications. If you do a good job, people ought to notice.
Thank you, Congressman Scott. So true.
And the detail, one of the things that we are very committed to doing, and we already started that, is to continue to post not only the current spending plan online, but as we make changes or make adjustments to continue that running record of the spending plan online for the community. And that level of transparency we feel is very impactful, because this is a one-time opportunity, and this should be transformational over the next 2 to 3 years. Dr. Best, I know you didn't ask this question, but I just want to share with the folks here that some of the funds, it's one-time money. So some of the things we're targeting right now may be increased staff in technology and or other areas where we're like clinically licensed social workers for social emotional support or reading interventionists. But we know that there will be a sunset in 2024 of this funding. And while we're trying a lot of new programs, we know we'll have to assess those programs for their effectiveness before we sunset these dollars to determine what we'll need to continue in our operational budget. So some of these things will need to be assessed as we go along for their impact. Mm-hmm. And if we're getting the gains that we expect to get, then we'll start phasing some of that staffing into our operational budget, because after 2024, now those programs or that staff that we've added will be on our dime, and we'll have to make sure we can afford it. Some things may sunset because we may not be able to fit it into our operational budget, but that's where we'll work with the city, because if we're getting the right gains with some of these innovative approaches, we're hoping that our city partners will continue to assist us with being able to fund programs that are meeting the needs of our students.
Okay. And Dr. Parker, this kind of leads into the next question, which was, which department is responsible for managing the use of these funds? And then you talked a little bit about this, but will there be public updates about the progress? And when I think of public updates for the public, it is not necessarily going into a large budget with dozens and dozens of pages. It's periodically, maybe a month or every 2 months. This is what we're doing. This is what has been done. This is what progress has been made. What are the plans as far as letting the public know, being proactive and letting the public know how this is being spent and the impact?
Well, we mentioned also right now that the spending plan is posted electronically with the survey tool for folks to provide input, and we'll continue to monitor that along the way. We met with the board this past week in our work session to talk about the CARES Act spending plan and some of the big targeted areas in that spending plan. But we also, and Dr. Bess, I don't know if you caught me at the end, I said we will be back by the end of this year to give the board an update on the progress we're making with with the spending plan, and whether any adjustments are needed, and whether we're seeing a need that was not anticipated, that where we may need to target some money, and that means that we're being responsible and proactive in making sure those funds are going towards specifically needed areas that will get us the gains that we need. So those are some of the ways that we'll continue to do that. Our public meetings, our meetings with the board are public. So when we provide reports to the board or update information, we normally send out media blasts with new information that comes out so periodically. So we anticipate that we'll continue to provide those type of updates over the course of these years on that CARES Act spending plan and how those funds are impacting Newport News. We also are committed to doing things like State of the Schools addresses, which will show our progress over the course of this strategic plan. And we'll also talk about how that funding is being used to meet the needs of the school division and our students under this current strategic plan. So I think there'll be plenty of opportunities to get input, to get information on how these dollars are effectively impacting instruction and the quality of instruction in our school division.
Okay, I'm gonna have 2 more quick questions for you, Dr. Parker. Will our secondary school students required to have a COVID-19 vaccine? And then the second question is, how will the pre-K program benefit from this funding?
Well, that's a good question. I'll start with the COVID-19. Right now, we're not mandating vaccinations for staff or students. With that as a caveat, this pandemic is ever changing and it's very aggressive. And we know that as we move forward, some cities and localities have required their staff to be vaccinated. We work with our most precious resource, which are our students and our children. So with that being said, I cannot say that if this aggressive pandemic continues to move on and it's in our benefit, to change our protocols and requirements for vaccination and or implementing some level of testing. We have to continue to make sure that we leave that as a possibility, because we'll do whatever is necessary to make sure our staff and students are safe, and we hopefully can protect our instructional programs. We'll never get the gains that Congressman Scott is talking about if our students are all home on virtual instruction. There's nothing that replaces the quality of instruction in a classroom where a teacher's sitting there meeting with their students every day and has that opportunity to interact with them in an academic setting. So with that being said, we have to protect that as best possible to make sure that we have the time to do that. In terms of pre-K funding, they do have their own sourced funding in pre-K. We are targeted. We did use CARES Act spending to provide all of our pre-K students with iPads. Kindergarten students will receive iPads this year, and first graders will be receiving iPads probably at the end of next year or the following year for first grade students. Right now, they're using Chromebooks. So we're expanding our technology into the to access to our students at the earliest level possible in our school division. And then we're also in the CARES Act 3 looking at replacing, if you guys remember, Congressman Scott remembers this, there used to be stimulus money back in 2008, 2009, the good old days, right? When the economy just bottomed out and schools divisions lost a ton of money. And so there were stimulus packages that were given back in 2008, 2009. Some of that funding was used in public education to buy classroom technology, such as smart boards for the fronts of the classrooms, and some use digital projectors. Some of that technology is almost 15 years old, 15 to 16 years old, and is really dated and needs to expire. So we're looking at the younger levels, pre-K, first grade, kindergarten. They get up to in front of the classroom, and they like to move things around, and they like to punch things and draw stuff on the board with these digital smart boards and those kind of things. But at the secondary level, the kids, that's not a big thing for middle and high school kids. So we are in our technology plan that will be supported with CARES Act funding. We're starting to sunset some of this older classroom technology and replace them with more modern technology in our younger students' classrooms. And our older students, we may end up going to larger display type products that allow them to either they can put something up right from their Chromebook. They can put it right up on the screen, or they can download something, those types of things. But they don't need to go up. They won't go up to the screen and be moving stuff around at the high school level. So that's outdated technology for our older students.
Okay. And Dr. Parker, and we are winding this down. I'm going to ask you this question, and it kind of leads into I'll add on a little bit. One of the questions was, will Newport News Public Schools use this money to hire tutors? And along that line, if a parent or just if a school board member was to ask a teacher in, let's say, December, how does the schools look different now from before receiving this money? What do you think they would be saying? What should we expect them to be saying?
I think they would speak to some of the products that they have access to, whether it's, there's a plethora of them, Read 180, our reading program in the middle school that we started during the pandemic. So they started virtually, but all of our middle schools now have reading remediation classes with a reading teacher, qualified reading teacher. They didn't have that. We're using Read 180, which is a product that we purchased through CARES Act funding. At the elementary level, we're using products like Smarty Ants, the math products that we did not have prior to pre-COVID that we're using to support CARES Act. All of our classrooms now are digital, one-to-one with a learning management system, and we teach from a blended learning approach. So teaching and blended learning, when we say blended learning, if you're not an educator, you may not understand what blended learning is. Blended learning is just an approach training teachers to teach classes when they have access to technology in the classroom. How do you teach in person and still maximize and leverage the technology that students have at their fingertips? So that blended being in person and virtual. Students can work online, students can work in small groups in person, students can do different products and projects. In the classroom, you can have 3 different groups of kids doing 3 different things, but they're working on the same content. So blended learning is a professional strategy that we're training our teachers to do. So if you came in December and said, hey, what's different? That's going to be very different, because now they're actually using a lot of different teaching approach that was non-existent a year ago. So I think there are plenty of things coming down the line that will be available to our teachers and students that we'll see over the course of this spending plan that will allow us to maximize learning in the classroom.
What about the tutors?
Tutors, we have already used University Tutors. It's a vendor that we've been using for the last 2 years. They provide tutoring assistance to our students, both in class and pull out. We've continued the contract with University Tutors to allow us to continue to do that. And we're also looking at other ways that we can provide. I would like to see us maximizing college students. We have CNU right next door to us, and we have Hampton down the street, and college students, as you know, need cash. So I don't see why we can't find a way to get some competent paid tutors out of the students, the secondary, post-secondary students that we have access to around us. So I think we'll be looking at ways that we can use retired teachers, and also we're in a teacher shortage, so we have to look at innovative ways to maximize that as well. But we'll be looking at creative ways. But University Tutors has been our go-to, and they've been very effective in providing additional support for students.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Parker, and thank both of you gentlemen. We're coming to the end of our hour here. And so again, I do want to give you an opportunity to briefly give us some closing remarks, but I have walked away with more knowledge today, and I hope that our listeners and those that have tuned in have walked away with more knowledge as well. And sometimes with more knowledge comes more questions. And I think I could take the liberty of saying that you all are always available to give more information when we need it. So again, thank you. And I will begin with Congressman Scott for closing remarks, and we'll follow with you, Dr. Parker.
Well, thank you, Dr. Best, Mr. Bullock, and of course, President Maxwell. Thank you for convening this forum, and thank you, Dr. Parker, for the hard work. These plans don't fall out of the sky. They take hard work to put together. So I want to thank you for focusing, particularly as it aims at eliminating the achievement gap. I'm confident that with the investments that can be made, that we can reopen the schools safely, keep them open safely, and eliminate the achievement gaps. Dr. Best, we need to reconvene maybe halfway in the school year to see what kind of progress we're making. We don't want to wait till the end of the year and say, whoops, it didn't work. We want to make sure that we're taking advantage of this opportunity. But we have a unique opportunity to make these investments and improve the education and future of our children. And let me just say that on a federal level, we're not finished yet. The American Families Plan and Jobs Plan and Infrastructure Plan, we're working on it now, but hopefully it'll include significant funding for school construction as one of the elements, as well as a lot of other things. But school construction is one of the things we're trying to get funded. It's going to be difficult because there are a lot of competing priorities, but we're going to do the best we can in terms of that, so that Dr. Parker will have even more to work with. So thank you, NAACP, for all you do, and keep up the good work.
Dr. Parker, thank you, Congressman Scott.
Well, and I would reiterate, thank you, Pastor Maxwell, for the opportunity to address this group this evening. It's always a good opportunity. We do have a few community tours going on. So this is kind of a kickoff for myself, because we'll be speaking with the community throughout the remainder of this month about the opening of school and sharing good information. We have a Facebook Live session coming up next week. So visit our website. There'll be more information coming out about upcoming events around the start of school. Our start of school plan is located there. Information on ESSER funding is there. So I can guarantee you, if you've picked up anything that new tonight, you'll probably pick up more by visiting our website. I'd just like to leave with this, that we're also spending some funding on social emotional supports for students in mental health. And I'd just like to leave us with that thought that we have a lot of students in our school division and in our community, and adults who really rely on the supports that we provide. So we have targeted some of our CARES Act spending to clinically licensed social workers and psychologists support. Newport News Public Schools is one of the only school divisions in this region that 2 or 3 years ago started hiring clinically licensed social workers. And we're very proud to say that they have been instrumental and beneficial over the pandemic in meeting the needs of students and families. So I'll leave with that thought that it's a continued our mission to make sure our students are well served and well fed, both physically and mentally. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you again. Thank you, Congressman Scott. Thank you, Dr. Parker, for just a wonderful session and very, very informative. And we will be following up with both of you for a follow-up session as well. We also, I would also like to just take a minute just to, as a school board member, just to share an announcement with those of you that are tuned in today. As you all are aware, the school board voted on last Tuesday to, they did not support the transgender policy that was presented at that time. However, I just want the public to know that we are continuing to take a look at that, and we are in the process of scheduling a meeting to revisit that again next week, so that you'll just be updated. Because of course we always support all students, and we want to make sure that we do the right thing for all students. So I just want to share that with you. I'd like to thank Dr. Maxwell and the NAACP for giving me an opportunity to host this meeting today, and a special thanks to the Education Committee Chair, Mr. August Bullock. It has definitely been a pleasure. And Reverend Maxwell, I'm done. If you have any closing remarks, the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you so much for what you did, because you put it together, and you keep saying the NAACP, but you are a part of it. You are on the committee. I thank you, Brother Bullock, and the rest of the committee for putting it together. Again, thank you, Congressman Scott. Thank you, Dr. Parker. Thank you, all the parents who ask questions. And if you have any other questions, if you continue to email us at info@willardmaxwell.org, I'll make sure that I get your questions to Brother Bullock, Dr. Best, and also to Dr. Parker. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you, Dr. Best, for addressing that situation, because I had a lot of people reaching out to me, asking me about the situation with the transgender issue, with the bathrooms and things of that nature. And I'm just glad that you all are, taking your time and be slow to make a decision, because sometimes when you spring into action, you may not do the right thing. So thank you all so much. Everyone, God bless you. Good night. Talk to you the next time. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.